excited to introduce to you another homeschool high school graduate, Jessica Binger Bejnar. She's here to share her story with us today. Hello, Jessica.
Hello.
I'm so excited that you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Jessica, could you share your story about your homeschool experience, what it was like to be a homeschool teen, and what year did you graduate? And what did life look like after graduation for you?
Sure. Okay, so I was homeschooled in the south suburbs of Chicago. And I actually had a bit of a different experience from a lot of friends I've had who've been homeschooled. I actually attended public school, kindergarten through 7th grade, and then was homeschooled after that. So I was pretty much exclusively a homeschool high schooler.
Okay.
And so as a kid, I was pretty used to kind of having routine and textbooks and things. So it took a little while to get used to the flexibility that could be there in homeschooling, but I came to appreciate that a lot. But yeah, my mom and I kind of worked to figure out what were textbooks and systems that worked well. But yeah, it was a really great fit for me. Basically, my mom had kind of learned about homeschooling toward the early part of my middle school years. And initially I was resistant. And then I basically did a year of junior high and was like, all right, I'm
ready. So your mom brought up the idea, you said no, and then you came back to her and said, yeah, let's give this a try.
It pretty much. I think she probably brought it up again after, I had some great teachers, some fine teachers, but I think the social world in that setting, it just wasn't a good fit for me. It wasn't a healthy place. And so I was, for me, being able to build a different community as a homeschooler, I think was just a lot more healthy for me. And then also just to be able to kind of follow kind of my academic interests was great.
Yeah.
So
what year did you graduate?
I graduated that's a great question. What year did I graduate? 2000, was it 2003? I graduated college in 2007, so it must have been 2003.
Okay. You are not the first homeschool graduate to go, what year did I graduate?
We don't really go to reunions and things. So.
This is true. So you were homeschooled during high school. You kind of helped pick the curriculum the books that you wanted to study. And then what did life look like for you after graduation? What did you do after graduation?
Yeah, so I attended Wheaton College in the Chicago suburbs as well, which is a private Christian liberal arts school. And I wound up majoring in philosophy. I did the Philosophy 101 class as a freshman and I was like, I've never had to think this hard in my life. I love it. So that was what I studied. I kind of dabbled in some other.
So did you go into college knowing what you wanted to do?
I didn't know what major I wanted to do. Kind of my sense of adulthood was a little loosey-goosey, to be honest. I think I had vague dreams of wanting to change the world, maybe go into overseas missions, things like that. I did not have a clear vocational path.
Okay.
Heading in, which, maybe didn't serve me in the best. But had a positive experience at Wheaton College, academically and in terms of making connections and community. I then went to Regent College in Vancouver, British Columbia for graduate school. It's a theology school. And my degree turned out to be history of Christianity. actually, which wasn't what I went in interested in, but they were the best professors. And so that was a whole other journey, but graduated, so kind of lived in Canada and British Columbia after that for a couple years, was up there for 8 years total. I met my husband in undergraduate, and we got married during grad school. His name is Felson, and yeah, so we lived in Canada for 8 years. Our daughter was born there. She's 6 years old. Her name is Ruby. And after grad school and during grad school, I have held a number of different jobs. I did some catering and other food service stuff, did some office jobs. I've done quite a bit of volunteer coordinating for work. I worked at a rescue mission, and have worn that hat in a couple different capacities. After that time, we moved to the Cincinnati area about 5 years ago. So that's where we live now. And one of the interests that I picked up through my education was in food systems and local food and agriculture and things like that. And we had folks that we knew from grad school in the Cincinnati area who are doing urban farming and a farm to table initiative. And so we connected with them and wound up moving here to take part in that, to join their community, and we've kind of built a life here.
Yeah. So you went from philosophy to food service, like being concerned about community. Can you bring the connection? Because it's not just giving people food, it's a special kind of community that you're living in, isn't it?
Yeah, so we actually, when we first came here, it was part of an internship that did a lot of readings and thinking through, like, food has meaning, the way that it's produced, the way that it exists in cultures. There's a lot of ethics and philosophy behind why people eat how they do, and the systems that there are, and what's available to people. So what is unique about the community one of the things that's unique about the community that we're part of is wanting to share organic local food with kind of generally. So it's actually a pay what you can initiative. So it's open to some of the homeless folks in our community and families and stuff like that. So it's a community of people who are being really thoughtful about not just their food choices, but kind of about all the aspects of day-to-day life, and building connections between our values and our beliefs and our practical life. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does. So it sounds like, have you kind of landed in the nonprofit world, or is it?
I would say, I mean, succinctly, yes.
Or maybe missional businesses where their mission is more than just sell a product.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
It kind of goes back to that philosophy that just lit you up back as a freshman.
Yeah.
You kind of brought it all the way through to today.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So Jessica, what do you feel that homeschooling gave you in order to take this big move of, you know what, I'm going to go to college. Oh, I really like this class, to moving all the way out of the country. I know it's Canada, but still, like, it's far away, and living in a different country for 8 years and then coming back. Like, what prepared you? What part of homeschooling prepared you to be able to make those choices and to be bold enough to move forward with them?
Oh, I never feel bold. I feel like such a scaredy cat but you got to jump and then be like, oh, that actually was a good decision. I think some of it was just learning that sense of flexibility, that it's worth following what sparks your curiosity, like what you're passionate about or what makes you think really hard. I remember, flipping through the homeschool catalogs and being like, oh, there's a book like, there's a logic class I could take. Mom, can I do that? And just the freedom of like, yep, if that's what you're excited about, like, let's follow that and see what happens. And I think that built kind of a sense of adventure and flexibility and openness to like try different things that felt unconventional. And I mean, on just being homeschooled at all, I knew very few homeschoolers, particularly people that I interacted with on a day-to-day basis. So it just felt like we were already, like, I kind of leaned into and embraced being kind of weird. And I think there's ways that served me well. And I think that that connects to learning how to think critically, to ask questions, not just being able to, but being like exhilarated by that. And just figuring out that for who I am, that's the thing that drives me. Like our youth group would do a Christmas play, and I would get very involved in the process of whether that was editing or kind of other pieces of that. And to say this is part of learning too, just kind of expanded that critical thinking. I think another, like an example, when I was in grad school and I was in one particular discipline that I was studying, I was working toward a thesis. I had kind of done a proposal, it had gotten approved, had started to work on it, but like I didn't have an advisor that was a good fit. And I spent several months on this and just kind of kept basically banging my head against the wall on it. And I had this moment where I woke up and was like, wait, if this isn't serving me, I don't actually have to do this. Like I'm spending a lot of time and credit hours and money on this thesis that's not actually gonna, like, it would be much more educational and enriching for me to switch majors and do these other classes and use those credits in a different way. And there's times when I've been torn about feeling like, oh, did I give up on something? But I think that like when I really step back and think about it, it was actually a really good choice to say no to something that maybe like felt like this very traditional academic path, but wasn't actually going to serve my learning as well as something else.
So you were able to do that at the grad level because you had practiced it during the high school years with your mom. So.
I think that it gave me,
because you kind of made that same decision about 7th grade.
Yeah.
It's the same decision, just later on. And you were given the freedom to make this decision for yourself. Hey, public school's not working for me, Mom. I want to come home.
Yeah.
And let's investigate what that would look like together. And it saved you probably a lot of time and money later on in life because you learned that skill to self-evaluate.
Right.
Yeah. That's amazing when you think about that. Like it's like, what a life skill. How many adults are just stuck in a job they don't like or a career that they don't like? It's because they've already put the time and the money and they knew it back then, but they didn't have the skill to pivot. Right? Yeah. That's what your life has been, a series of pivoting. You pivoted when you're a freshman and you pivoted again when you got to grad school, and you're pivoting now, moving into this nonprofit food world. That's a bunch of pivoting that you've done.
It is. And it's helpful to be able to see those threads though, like you're saying, like it can feel disjointed, but if you think about it, it all, like they're pivots that all kind of they follow from each other.
Yeah, that's amazing. Was there any part of homeschooling that felt that it caused a deficit in your life? Like, oh, I wish I had this when I was a teenager, or I wish I had studied this. Is there any part of homeschooling that was kind of a negative for you?
I think that as a very academically inclined person, I wish that I would have had more preparation for kind of the technical discipline of research and writing. Like I can write well enough kind of off the cuff, but I never learned kind of the skill of let's do a first draft and throw it away and start it like that process. Didn't, and it's anytime you kind of are reflecting in this way, I'm like, well, would it have been different or better if I had been in a different school situation? I don't know. But as a young person, I wish somehow that foundation would have been built a little bit better. I think that would have served me well later. Again, I really appreciate the freedom that I had to kind of choose my path, but I feel like sometimes I also could have done with a little bit more direction to choose things that didn't come as naturally to me, both in the sense of having an opportunity to do things that were hard and to fail and to like learn how to do that well, and also to interact with kind of broader, more experiences of people who have different perspectives or different experiences than mine. I was kind of the kid who would go to the library and be like, well, I'm going to read everything by Charles Dickens. And like, that's really charming, but there were some things that I missed that I think I should have engaged with sooner. I think sometimes because I came out of a structured public school environment, like where there was kind of authority and like grades and things, I've always kind of like had this little bit of a question in my mind of like, did I miss something? Do I have gaps? I don't know. I didn't kind of have somebody like official to tell me. Like, I think it was pretty okay, particularly given whatever options would have been available to me. But yeah, I think I'm rambling.
Oh, you're doing fine, because I think what you're talking about is the fear that every homeschool parent has is gaps.
Yeah.
Right? Like the parents are afraid of it. The kids kind of think about it, but not as much as the homeschool parent does until the kids get out from the home.
Yeah.
But what your parent did well, even though you had some gaps, you still knew how to learn.
Yeah.
And you took those gaps and filled them. And it's hard to evaluate. Would you have had the same gaps if you were in public school?
Right.
Because you could have had a bad English teacher in a public school setting or a private school setting. Like, to think about those gaps, I think in the homeschooling, and you're a homeschool mom now too, right? You're homeschooling.
So we did homeschool for pre-K. She's actually going not quite full-time to a Montessori kindergarten this year. So I'm involved at her school, but she is attending a school. So
okay. So what my point is that you're going to be faced with the same things, like even if she's away at school, like, is she going to be missing something? And we'll never, as homeschool parents, ever be able to fill all the gaps. We're just not going to be able to, but our goal should be to teach our kids how to learn. So I find it funny that you have a master's and you're still like, I'm not, and so I think that has to probably do because you just love learning and you're not sure if you learned everything.
Right.
You said, like, go to the library and I would read every single book that this author did. Like, so your personality is go all in and know everything, every bit of detail. So it probably goes as an adult, you're like, did I miss something?
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. Right?
It is. And I think you're absolutely right. It is. And that self-doubt doesn't necessarily serve well. Another thing I sometimes wonder about is, could I have a little more help with the practical skill of transferring my interests to kind of tangible vocation and work? That's a hard one. For not everybody knows when they're in high school.
No.
What their path is going to be, or can kind of grasp like what is the value, like kind of value in itself of good work, and how the world might change. I think when I was in college, I really imagined a very academic future, and then after I graduated, actually the world of higher learning, there's been a lot of shifts, and so it's a complicated question, and it's the kind of thing that I feel like, oh man, it would have been good if I would have been better prepared for being a grown up, but
Even though you were a grown up and you were doing it very well. And I think this is the reason why I'm doing these interviews, is because not everybody comes out of high school knowing exactly what they're wanting to do.
No.
And that's okay. It's scary for the homeschool parent.
Yeah.
Most teens just look at it as an adventure, but being okay with that and saying, I just did an interview where the graduate went from being a cosmetologist to graduating from Duke and becoming a nurse practitioner. Like her journey was all about just the love of learning and taking those risks to change and to pivot with her desires. Yeah. And so you did the same thing. And I think you bring up a very good point when it comes to making a living and paying bills, like, especially if you have a heart and you have a tendency to gravitate towards missional work or nonprofit work, the money's just not there like it is in being a doctor or these different things. And sometimes as parents, we re-rate them of, oh, this was more successful because they made this amount of money. And so we have to be careful of that, because missional work and nonprofit work is just as valuable as somebody being a doctor. And so, it's just as important that you're in your space helping people get come out of food security issues and giving them food as it is somebody taking care of the body in a medical sense. You're both helping an individual. Just one pays better than the other. Right? Is that what you're talking about? Just having the skill set to be able to make a different income level? Is that what you're suggesting?
Not necessarily. I think the skill set to evaluate what income level is important to you, like kind of what all your values are and what you need kind of your structure of your life to be like, to
more
have the like
holistic approach.
Yeah. And also to say, well, I'm kind of generally interested in these things, but how do I kind of make that be a job? Not just so that I can make enough money, but so that kind of I have this like focus in my life. And not everybody struggles with that, but I think some people in my generation do. So.
Yeah. And that's okay, because you're so young. Right? Like, you still get to work it out, Yeah. And I mean, even here I am, graduating my last homeschool graduate and going online and doing an online business. It's like, you're going to be doing that throughout your whole life, and you have the skill set to do that, and you've been doing it beautifully.
I forgot to mention in the beginning, I did a birth doula training a couple of years ago, and that's kind of another piece that I'm working out. You're trying to figure out supporting people and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Jessica, I do appreciate your time being here. And I would love for you, if you would give parents some advice. You live this, you have a daughter now, like you're approaching life. You've identified, like, being a homeschooler in the early, late 90s, early 2000s, it looks different than it does now. There are so many resources out there and so many different opportunities. And so, but you live this life. We're just homeschool facilitators. We're just making the magic happen. Can you give us some advice on things that we should think about parenting these teens?
Sure. Gonna see if I can decipher my notes here. I think one of the things that I would want parents to think about is finding that balance of structure and freedom in what you pursue. Because it's really valuable for students to have opportunities to find out what they care about, to trust their gut, and also to make mistakes and fail and try again. But there's, you're holding the balance of knowing what are the essential basics of what they do need to learn, but to not hold the details of that too anxiously. I think that can be easy to do as a parent. And just understand that so much of life is education, and you can trust your gut too as a parent. I think that when your kids sense that you trust them with their work and with their interests and stuff, it gives them kind of a more of an incentive to care about what you're saying and what you're encouraging them towards. Sure. Which is just an interesting, I think high school, like adolescence, is just this wild liminal time of independence and still being very dependent on your parents. Yeah, so just remembering who they are. And there's so much that I did not appreciate about my mom when I was in high school that I look back and I'm like, actually, she was learning on the fly with a high schooler how to do this. And I have a younger brother and sister as well, and we've all turned out pretty well.
Because your mom didn't have the same resources that homeschool parents have now.
No, absolutely not.
You know,
yeah.
It was dial-up. Come on. Like, when I had to look for information, I had to go to the library or wait for a conference. And so
go through those catalogs. I would say the other thing, my thought was, get outside, play, move your bodies, like be whole people. Like, even though it's high school and there's this feeling of like, oh, we're moving toward college, we have to, like, it's going to serve you better to be a grown up if you've got this whole holistic kind of sense. Yeah. So kind of doing that, making connections with other wise folks around, whether that's an official homeschooling or in other ways, is important. There's just so much, like you said, there's so many resources to draw on now. So do that. Kind of on a different note, another thought I had was, at least for me and some of the people that I knew, after high school graduation can be a lonely kind of unmoored time if you were a kid in youth group or you're in a homeschool co-op or something. And so I guess just be aware of that as kids go off after they graduate, that just help them to know it's okay to kind of take time to value making connections and community, whether they're going to a private college or community college or a trade school. I think that, I just knew a number of folks who felt pretty shook up after high school. It's a big change.
Do you think it's because, especially the time period that you were homeschooling, there wasn't this huge circle of people around you, so you had to be close to the few homeschoolers that you knew.
Yeah.
And then you go into this university, which the one you pick is very highly academic. It's a huge school, and you just become one of thousands.
Yeah.
Because you've mentioned a couple of times of like learning how to fail, not that you use learning how to fail gracefully, but when you're in this home where you're constantly following your interests, constantly dictating what's happening, you're usually more invested. And then when you get out to the college and now you have to take this class that you're not so interested in, and you have to dig deep to find a reason to stay to get that diploma, I can see how that could create this loneliness that happens, especially during the time period that you were homeschooling. But I did interview somebody for the conference about incoming freshmen, and they're experiencing the same thing, even coming out of public school and stuff. So I think it's a real thing that you experienced, and the other homeschoolers experienced. You probably just identified it because you were homeschooled, right? Right.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not unique to us.
Yeah, but they were saying the problem is that that they usually, the 18 and 19-year-olds right now don't have the skill to even withdraw from a class or to change classes. Did you have that experience when you were in college? Did you navigate the whole college thing on your own?
I mean, particularly after freshman year, I did. And there was one particular class. I tried to take calculus-based physics, and that's just was not a good fit for who I was as a person. And after I kind of wept through one exam, I was like, this is not for me. And I figured out how to withdraw. But it is a skill to navigate all of that and to figure out, how does this work? Who do I talk to? What are my deadlines? What are my options? What are the potential consequences? Is that worth it?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's not, it isn't as encouraged as maybe it should be to,
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that reminder that we think, we get through high school and we're done.
Mhm.
And that's a fallacy, because for me, that's when the real work started, because being available to listen to your kids want to change majors or drop classes. They usually bring up those conversations at 11 o'clock at night when you're ready to go to bed, right? How many times did you call your mom? It's usually after the other siblings went to bed. And so, but thank you for that reminder that to get outside, spend time as a teen with your kids, be outside, and to listen to who they are, and to be gentle with them during their freshman year if they decide to go to college or even move into a trade or something. I'm sure there's just onboarding into adulthood is rough, right? Yeah. And thank you for that reminder to walk alongside them and encourage them. I do appreciate that. And I do appreciate you being so generous with your time and being so open about your journey and sharing it so freely with us. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.